Hey, what's going on everyone? It's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and in today's video I'm talking about a new headphone from Meze Audio, and this is called the Strada. The Strada has a launch MSRP of $800 here in the United States, which puts it kind of in the mid to high end category depending on what your typical budgets are. For a lot of people this is ultimate flagship category, and I will be comparing it to some headphones above and below this price range to hopefully give you an idea of kind of where this one stacks up. Meze Audio did send this to me for review. It won't affect what I say about it. I say this on every video that for products that are sent to me for review, and I do purchase things that aren't. I built my channel on honesty and trust, and I always want to disclose everything as much as possible so you don't think I have a hidden agenda, because at the end of the day, my goal is that if I meet any of you in person, that you feel like I'm genuine and what I told you wasn't misleading. I'd like to have a friendly interaction if I were ever to see you in person. So Meze Audio is one of the few companies that has a preference towards using affiliate links, and it's no knock to Meze Audio. A lot of brands request this, and it's partly because they're not just trying to entice you to give you money. A lot of times they want to track the success or exposure of a video. So link clicks helps them kind of see where the clicks are coming from for people to hit their website so they know if their outreach programs are effective. This isn't a specific thing to Meze, this is just how the industry works. Now, I've typically fought and avoided all affiliate links. Out of respect for Meze, I am including an affiliate link. I do get a small kickback from that. It's literally just a few % if you use the link, which helps support the channel for me to buy things. But I also will be providing non-affiliate links beyond the typical ones I list. Like if Apos Audio is carrying it, I'm going to use the Apos one as well because that will have its own link. There are affiliate kickbacks with some of these, just the same way Amazon works. So this was kind of a long tangent, but this is one of the few times where I have a direct affiliate link for the brand, and I wanted to disclose how that works and why, so you don't feel it changes anything. Naturally, with any review, you want to watch multiple reviews, and if you can, you want to hear it for yourself, because your own ear is your most trustworthy thing. It's what you hear and what you like, not necessarily what I like. So let's dive into it. Now, Meze Audio is known to include good accessories in the box, and that's no different here with the Strada, especially considering the price point, because even their less expensive headphones have pretty good accessories. So you get a hard EVA case, which does work well for protection if you do happen to be traveling with a near $1,000 headphone. But when it's sitting at your home, it will look good as well. Meze has just a really good aesthetic, at least in my opinion, on the case. Has a really good zipper quality and the nice Meze Audio logo. So it'll do its job, but it'll look good doing it. Star of the show is obviously the Strada itself. I don't want to just push this out of the way, but the rest of the video is going to be about this glorious little headphone. So I'm going to place it there just while I go over the accessories, and we'll take a closer look at the headphone itself. Now, you get a leatherette pouch included in the box. This is going to include your cables. I say cables because I had an early access press unit. I only had one cable in the box. The production units that you will receive will have two cables, one of them being a 3.5 millimeter cable and the other one being a 4.4 balanced cable. Both of them are 1.8 meter Kevlar OFC cables. They look identical, they just have a different termination on them. Naturally, the single-ended version will work with a 1/4 inch or 6.3 millimeter adapter, which is also included. So pretty straightforward on the accessory side. Meze Audio does sell more expensive balanced cables, especially on their website. So if you want something a little bit more premium looking than the included OFC cable, which by the way has really good microphonic performance, there's no real issues with noise going into the cup itself. These cables are available at a higher charge, and frankly, I think they look great and they work really well. So if you want something a little more luxurious, you can always add that later. Otherwise, that's usually included on their higher end models. The chassis itself is sized for quite a large variety of head sizes, to be honest. You still get the damped telescoping yoke, and this just feels awesome. Having a really smooth finish like that, it swivels indefinitely. There's no cable inside, so they don't have to worry about a hard stop. And I think sizing overall is quite good. Now, the strap itself is really thick, which helps with weight distribution and pressure. It's not a suspension strap, but there are nice pads here. These are very soft. It's a breathable, kind of like a sport fabric material. And you have the little detent there in the center to help relieve stress or like a hard point in the center of your head. The thing I want to point out with this, it is shockingly light for how large and impressive this looks. This looks like a heavier headphone and something you would perceive as a heavier headphone because of the whole quality thing, the price, etc. But thanks to using, magnesium alloy and lightweight materials, this weighs only 330 grams. That's a pretty remarkable feat, and it just feels really light on the head. Now, it's noticeably lighter than the Lyric 2, because this is using a dynamic driver, unlike the Lyric 2, which is using a planar. So even if you just remove the identical pads, because I haven't really seen a difference, the dimensions are basically the same. We're going to get right into it. So the new Strada has a dynamic driver, and it's basically the 109 Pro driver retuned for closeback performance with this chassis design. So totally different chassis, obviously, than the 109 Pro, and different tuning properties on the driver itself. With the Renaro driver on this planar has very different sound characteristics, which I'll get into, but I just wanted to show you one of the key differences. The planar magnetic headphones just weigh more because they have that stacked array of neodymium magnets, and that adds up, whereas on a dynamic driver, you forego that. So the weight can come down quite a bit, and then you take advantage of the lightweight materials used elsewhere in the headphone. The rest of the build quality is typical Meze audio, and you have 3.5mm terminal inputs on it, which means you can use a variety of aftermarket cables. Again, the stock Meze ones are so good, and for the fact that the balance cable's included, that's kind of a sweet selling point to me. And it uses a TS sleeve cable. There's enough clearance where some aftermarket cables will still work without any issue. It doesn't have the same recess that the 99 Classics did. Even the V2 is still recessed, even though they opened it up a little bit. This is a little bit more forgiving in case you had your own cables you wanted to roll to, but overall I'm really happy with the design. As far as the rest of the overall aesthetics go, I don't want to focus too much on this because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and my opinions may differ from yours. I've always loved this chassis. I think the Meze headphone lineup is stunning in general, whether it's the Elite, the Empyrean, the Empyrean 2, the Lyric, the Poet. I've liked their looks. This is a little bit more out there because it's a fairly bold green. It's like a rich emerald green and a lighter wood stain. I think maybe it would have looked better with a darker stain, but they're trying to make it different. So it's just a matter of if you like it or not. I don't mind this look, again, like I said earlier, just because it's different, and I like something that stands out to the rest of my collection. So that's kind of where I'm going to leave it from there. I like the overall design of the headphone. The colorway just might not be for everybody. This has better sound isolation than the FiiO FT1, and it's comparable, if not, it's really hard to gauge perfectly, but basically the Sennheiser HD620S has had some of the best sound isolation I've heard on a closeback, partly because it squeezes your head more. It has definitely a stronger clamp. The clamp force of the Strada is in the moderate category, and I think it's where it should be. Because the pads are larger, you can get away with squeezing a little bit more and the pressure isn't as concentrated, but it's noticeably less clampy than the HD620S. And with the larger pads and this nice breathable inner liner, I can still wear this for a longer period of time than something like the Sennheiser. Now, before I get into objective sound quality, I want to mention the electrical impedance. And this is basically just to help you understand how this behaves on different amplifiers. Now, Meze Audio rates this at 40 ohms, and I measured it closer to about 46 ohms on my DATS V3. But it's fairly linear. Like, you can see a nice curve here just due to my scale, but overall the impedance swing isn't that much, which means if you have a solid state amp with a very low output impedance and maybe switch to a very high output impedance amp like an OTL, you're not going to hear a huge difference in sound quality. It shouldn't change much. It may boost the like low mid-range a little bit, and it might table off some of the high treble, but it's going to be minor. You're talking like a decibel or less as a whole, so not anything big, which is kind of good. And these Meze Audio products in general don't typically need super high-end amps for scaling purposes. You can get away with a much less expensive amp. In fact, these are so easy to drive. I hooked them up to my Apple MacBook Pro, for example, and it still sounded great to me. So the other reason why I wanted to show you the electrical impedance is because this, again, was using the same driver as the 109 Pro. So I measured the 109 Pro's impedance, and you can see some similarities in the higher frequencies, but different tuning in the bass side. So again, it's the same driver, but they do some modifications to it so it better behaves in a closed back chassis. I just wanted to cover that so you had an idea how this measured. Now, continuing with measurements and focusing on sound quality, I want to preface this by saying I'm measuring this on a Gross KB006X Pentaclone and an IEC 711 coupler clone. This is going to be ending soon. I'm always going to try to measure it on the Gross clone, if you will. But with help of Wicked Cushions, if you weren't aware, I actually purchased a Brüel & Kjær at 5128, and it's only about 2 weeks away from being delivered. I'm beyond excited, and I'm going to be remeasuring everything because I've kept about 90% of the products I review. So I have over 200 headphones here that I'll be adding. The measurements that you're seeing at the time of filming this is on the Gros clone. And I will update this video later once the 5128 shows up and I remeasure it so you can compare. Having said all that, it measures quite well on my rig. Now the sub-bass impact is strong. It's actually not as strong as some other headphones out there when you compare it to like the Sennheiser HD620S or the more expensive Lyric 2. The sub-bass is even stronger on those. The Strada kind of aims for a more linear sound profile overall. The bass isn't as strong as the Lyric 2. The mid-range is relatively flat, and although the treble does have its own couple hot spots, it sounds more tame and frankly more easy to listen to than the Lyric 2. I'll get into the subjective stuff because I'll always go off on a tangent. There's a lot of things that are connected here. The most noticeable thing I will say is it may not have the same mid-bass punch, but it sounds like thicker and heavier than I think it measures, at least the way I hear it when I was listening to it. I didn't feel it needed a ton more bass, but you can easily boost it. I added like a 6 decibel bass shelf just to play with it and have some fun, and it handled it no problem. It has a little bit of a scoop leading up into 2000 hertz, but this peak right here that I want to highlight, right about 3900 hertz, 4000 hertz, it's basically a 4000 hertz like resonance of the headphone. It's minor for me, but it is there, and it even showed up a little bit on the electrical impedance plot. So there's something interesting that the way the driver is interacting with the chassis in my head, where 4K can come across as a little bit hot, but it wasn't too bad. It just kind of is, it's only noticeable when you compare it to some other headphones that have a big dip in this area. Something like the LCD S20 or the Aoun SR7000, they're much more relaxed in this area, which also has a byproduct of not sounding as detailed. You feel like you're missing some of that, low to mid treble, whereas this one doesn't have that same issue. Hopefully I haven't been pointing to the Lyric 2 too much when I'm saying this. The other peak in null is greatly exaggerated by my current rig. Now you see a little peak here closer to 8000 hertz followed by this huge dip. When I did a sine sweep and listened to this headphone myself, I didn't have a huge peak at 8000 hertz because I'm particularly sensitive to 8000 hertz. It was actually kind of I heard the shallow part happen more closer to 8K, but my peak came in closer to 9000 hertz and it was minor, but it was there. And then there was a couple hot spots in the high treble. The 15,000 hertz air region in particular was noticeably hotter than some other headphones, although still more relaxed than the Lyric 2. Treble is a really hard thing to say definitively how it's going to sound unless it's like overly egregious, because we have different hearing health. The peaks will come at different levels and your sensitivities will vary. So while I do think there are a couple hotspots to address if you're really trying to make it as easy to listen to as possible, overall it doesn't come across as a fatiguing headphone to me. I think the high treble is the only area that I might table off and maybe tune the bass to taste, but to me it really wasn't bad of a peak at all, and I like the characteristics of this overall without EQ comparing to many other headphones, which I'll touch on in the subjective area. The other thing I want to note on the objective measurements is the left and right channel matching. I don't know if I got a golden unit or not. The bass delivery is going to be slightly inconsistent because that's affected by seal on a flat plate measuring rig. However, the mid-range and treble, I did 9 seatings per side and remeasured it. And the mid-range and treble consistency was almost the same regardless of how I put the headphone on. So it's very, very consistent among placement on your head, which is awesome because not everyone's always going to place it perfectly. And when you have something shifted with a headphone that has a lot of placement variance, you kind of create your own channel imbalance with different peaks and dips. That doesn't happen with the Strada. And because the driver matching is exceptional, at least on my unit, I thought the imaging performance was excellent as well. And it's very easy to EQ because I'm getting the exact same peaks and dips from the left and right driver. It just makes things so much simpler to really dial in. And I think that consistency mixed with the comfort and overall generally good sound signature is going to please a lot of people. And that leads me into the subjective side. Getting right into the bass, mid, and treble. The reason why I connect this and start with the objective side first is because it kind of helps tie in how I experience it with the measurements and where my differences lie. This measures to have a little bit less bass than what I observed, and I think that's partly with how the mid-range and treble is tuned as a whole. It's not a bass cannon. If you want a little bit more forward punchy bass, the FiiO FT1 still has a pretty insane amount of bass. The Sennheiser HD620S, and I'm going to just bring out a few other comparisons while I talk. The Sony MDR M1 is a lot of fun in the bass area, but it's going to be quite different in the mids and high frequencies. So I'm going to loosely make some comparisons after. I just figure they should all be out so I don't forget. It's kind of like my mental checklist. I like the bass of this. It doesn't have the same sub-bass tactility and extension as the Lyric 2. So if you like this chassis design and you're really trying to discern the difference between the Lyric 2 versus the Strada, aside from a pretty substantial difference in price, because it's basically twice the price, the Lyric 2 is just noticeably more tactile and clear. Every note that you hear sounds a little bit more resolving. To me, I actually can listen to the Strada 2 for a significantly longer period of time at medium to higher volumes when no EQ is considered, partly because of the comfort with the less weight, but the more relaxed sound signature in general to me is just easier to kind of digest. The Lyric 2 is incredible, and I've liked it. It's been one of my favorite closebacks because I do EQ, and you get all that resolution and speed and detail that I want from the planar. Again, that sub bass is just amazing, but the highs are a little bit scintillating and spicy without doing any EQ, so it's not always going to be for everyone. The bass on this is still very impactful. It sounds warm, and I don't think it's like overly tight. It's a little bit softer than the Lyric 2, but it's still tighter than something like the Sony MDR M1. I think the FiiO FT1's bass delivery is a little bit tighter and punchier sounding, partly because of how it's tuned. It just has different emphasis at higher frequencies. But overall, I still like the general extension and depth that I'm getting with the Strada. It's a good balance of being like fast enough, but still has a nice softer sensation to it to, again, not be as fatiguing or like overly forward. I hope I'm not like going off too much on a tangent. It's really hard to explain certain audio characteristics beyond frequency response sometimes, because your experiences and what you listen to from music is going to change how the headphone interacts as well. You know, your genres will impact that. Thankfully, I don't think it's colored in such a way where mids are overly thick and boxy. There is a general lift from like 400 hertz to about 1000 hertz in general. It definitely isn't like a very strong V-shaped headphone in any way. So if it sounds a little bit thicker and heavier to you, I would do a really wideband parametric EQ dip, you know, from the 400 hertz to, let's say, 1000, and, you know, just take it like a half decibel down, maybe just under a full decibel down, if it just sounds a little heavy. I don't think it did that necessarily, but it doesn't like emphasize feminine characteristics of voices. Everything has like a nice natural smoothness to it, but it doesn't sound as light and airy as I get with something like the Lyric 2. The Focal Azurus seems to have a little bit more vocal presence and forwardness to it, but it's colored in a way where it can sound just a touch like honky sounding, if that makes sense. So even though you get more of it, to me, it can be a little bit fatiguing sometimes with the wrong track, whereas this doesn't have that nature or that effect to it. So overall, very relaxed mid-range presentation. I still think the timbre characteristics actually quite good until you get to about that 4000 hertz peak, where you can hear a noticeable lift in that area. And if you're really sensitive to that peak, it will stand out. And again, it also depends on what you listen to, because if you're coming from something like the Sony MDR M1, which I've liked a lot in the past, this has significantly less resolution and clarity. I feel like you just hear more with the Strada and it sounds wider. This is super relaxed sounding in that same vocal area, so it might be a little jarring transitioning from this to that, and it would even be more jarring to go for something like the Azurus until you get beyond 4000 hertz, where a lot of these have a huge recess and it's very dark sounding. Did I even bring it out? I don't even see it. I have the Aeon SR7000 as well. That one has a very big dip after 4000 hertz. So yeah, it's smooth and easy to listen to, but I feel like I'm missing some stuff. I do like this SR7000. I feel like it's been one of my favorite sub $1,000 closebacks now, just because it's very easy to listen to, and it still kind of stages wide and likes to throw around notes really well. This one just gives you a lot more, and it just skirts the line of being forward. while not being too punishing or fatiguing. So it doesn't have that same huge dip that a lot of these have. And even the Odyssey LCD S20, which has amazing bass. If you like to EQ bass and you're trying to get the most like slam and sub bass you can, combined, the S20 is great for that. However, the voicing of the S20, it's a lot more forward. It kind of has like a hot spot that really pinches the vocals, and then it's dipped significantly, again, giving you a darker presentation. So it's when you start considering the whole package that it's really hard to get a closeback to me that does everything right. I think tuning-wise, the Dan Clark E3 was the closest out of the box to how I'd want it to sound, but I just couldn't wear that one personally. It was too uncomfortable for me because the clamp force right here on my jaw just gave me headaches after a relatively short period of time, which is why I always gravitated towards the Lyric 2 with EQ. Some HiFi headphones will give you that awakening sensation when you hear things you've never heard before and they're really forward. If you go too far down that path, it can become fatiguing, and I'm not listening to impress someone every single day. I'm listening to music because I'm working 8 hours a day on the cybersecurity stuff, and I've just been enjoying listening to the genres that helps me get through the day, and this sound profile has just been better suited for that. I've been really happy with it because it doesn't sound unnatural to me. The timbre is actually quite good until you get into that 4,000 hertz peak, where again, when you're coming from some of these, it'll be a more noticeable peak than some others here. When I compare it to the 99 Classics V2, which was a big improvement to me over the V1, it doesn't have that same, the bass is significantly reduced and it still has really nice voicing. It's a surprisingly good closebag for the few $100 price range, or just over a few $100. The biggest difference that I heard is this seemed to just have better detail retrieval and instrument separation. So if you're chasing the micro dynamics and listening to a wider variety of music where the detail retrieval matters to you more, it does come across as a better, more separate presentation. I also feel the overall audio presentation is wider. It's easier kind of to discern the placement of instruments in the mix, whereas the less expensive 99 Classic, although voiced well, to me just sounds a little bit more compressed and a little bit less resolving. Then you get into the Lyric 2 and the Poet. The Poet is like a very interesting headphone because the bass is basically flat. It doesn't have the same emphasis in the vocal region like the Pinagain area. And then the treble is relatively tame until you get into the air region where it comes across as much more forward. So it's a unique presentation. I wasn't as much of the fan as the Poet. That was probably the one I was the most critical of the last few Meze launches in general. In the Lyric 2, it has a similar air issue in the high treble, so I'd still EQ it, but the sub bass on this is just bonkers good. So if you like just gobs of sub bass, maybe you're using this for mixed content consumption and watch a lot of movies too. If you can tame some of the treble, if it even bothers you, the Lyric 2 is pretty exceptional there. The biggest difference with the Lyric 2 is because of the way the treble's tuned, everything just sounds more open and airy. So it's trying to cheat that whole close back, open back thing. But to me, the treble's just a little bit too forward in doing so, whereas they pulled that back on the Strada. So I actually think the Strada is one of the better tuned Meze audio products in general because I can listen to everything. I still get a good balance of detail retrieval and comfort. Its stage is wide enough for me. There's a noticeable improvement over the 99 Classics. So at least I feel like I'm getting my money's worth on the sound department. And then the chassis improvements are excellent as well. It's really hard to get a good, fully passive analog closeback headphone. They're always going to have these unique characteristics. I don't think there's a perfect one out there. Again, I thought the E3 was tuned really well. Dan Clark headphones typically have a good tuning, but the chassis hasn't always worked for me in my head. So I can't EQ comfort into my headphone. And the Meze audio products in general, especially this chassis design, these three, just fits my head so well that I'd rather just EQ it to my taste, and then I can enjoy it. This dynamic driver is great. It's so easy to drive. I can plug this into anything. You can plug it into a gaming controller and it'll get more than loud enough. So it's a very usable, everyday, serviceable headphone with the premium aesthetics and build quality that you'd expect from Meze Audio. And if you hold on to it long enough to ever need service, their support is excellent. You can get a huge variety of parts to fix this yourself later if for any reason it ever needed that. And that about wraps it up. You made it to the end. Huge congrats, because I tend to go off on a tangent, and I hope you found the information you were looking for on the new Strada. I'm really glad they finally came out with one in this price range, because it went from their $300, $350 99 Classics to the $2,000 Lyric 2, and now we have something that is basically in between of both, if anything closer to the less expensive side, and still gives you a noteworthy upgrade. So I hope you found this video helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe so I could see you at the next one. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.